So, we've all heard the word bankruptcy thrown around, but what does it actually mean when an individual in India goes through it? It's not like flipping a switch. It's a full-on legal journey with a very specific start, a middle, and an end. In this explainer, we're going to walk you through that entire path step by step. So let's dive in. It's a heavy question, right? And this path you see here, it's not just a graphic. It really represents a super structured legal process. It's not one single event, but a whole series of stages, each with its own strict rules, all leading to one final destination, a fresh start. So, where does a journey like this even begin? Well, here's something that might surprise you. An individual can't just wake up one morning and decide, you know what, today's a good day to file for bankruptcy. It just doesn't work that way. The law actually designs it as an absolute last resort. The process can only be triggered after other attempts to fix the debt have already failed. So think of it like this. The door to bankruptcy is locked. You only get the key if one of three very specific things go wrong first. Maybe an initial plan to sort out the debt gets rejected by the authorities. Or a repayment plan is put forward but the creditors voted down. Or maybe a plan gets approved but it just falls apart halfway through. Only then, after one of these failures, can someone apply. And they've only got a tight 3-month window to do it.
Okay, so the trigger's been pulled. One of those failures has happened. What happens when that application is finally filed? Well, this is the point where the formal legal machinery really kicks into high gear and things start to move fast.
The second that application is filed, a few things happen almost immediately. A legal shield, called an interim moratorium, pops up to protect the debtor. At the very same time, the process to appoint someone called a bankruptcy trustee gets started, and once that trustee is confirmed, the court, which is formally called the adjudicating authority, has just 14 days to issue the official bankruptcy order.
And let's just talk about this interim moratorium for a second, because it is so powerful. I want you to think of it like a giant, legally enforced pause button. All the lawsuits against the debtor's property, they're frozen. Creditors can't start new ones. It creates this absolutely crucial breathing room while everything else gets sorted out.
So, with the process officially underway, a central figure steps onto the scene to manage, well, everything. This person is the bankruptcy trustee. You can think of them as the administrator, the guide, and the manager for the rest of this entire journey. So what does this trustee actually do? Well, their job really boils down to these 3 core things. First, they dig in and investigate all the finances to get a complete picture. Second, they realize the estate, which is just the formal way of saying they gather up and sell the bankrupt's assets. And finally, they take all the money that's been raised and distribute it to the creditors, following a very strict legal pecking order.
Once that bankruptcy order is passed, life for the individual changes. And I mean, it really changes, in very specific, legally defined ways. This isn't just about resetting your finances. It comes with a whole set of pretty significant restrictions and disqualifications.
And this slide really gets to the heart of that change. The person is no longer just a debtor. They now have a new official legal status. They are a bankrupt. And it's this formal designation that triggers all the rules that are about to follow. And these restrictions have a direct day-to-day impact. For example, you can no longer be a director of a company. Thinking of traveling overseas? You're going to need the court's permission. Even taking on new debt requires a sign-off from the trustee. It's a period of really intense financial oversight. And it goes even further than personal restrictions. There are also some really serious disqualifications, especially for any positions of public trust. A bankrupt person is barred from holding public office, from being a public servant, or from acting as a trustee for other people. And these rules stay in place until the whole bankruptcy process is finished. So the big question is, where does the money to pay the creditors actually come from? Well, it comes from something called the bankruptcy estate. This is just the legal term for all of the bankrupt's assets, which now officially belong to the bankruptcy trustee to manage. But, and this is a really important but, they don't take everything. The law draws a very clear line in the sand. On one side, you have the estate, which includes most property, money, land, cars, things like that. But on the other side, the law specifically protects certain assets. We're talking about things like the tools you need for your job, basic furniture for your home, and your pension fund. This is to make sure the person isn't left with absolutely nothing. And just to give you a really concrete example of these protections, the law even puts a specific number on it. For example, a person's home, their dwelling unit, can be a protected asset as long as it's valued under 20 lakh rupees in an urban area. It's a really key rule designed to protect a basic standard of living. Okay, so the trustee has sold the assets, and there's a pot of money. It's not a free-for-all. The money gets paid out in a super strict order, often called a payout waterfall. First up, the costs of running the bankruptcy process itself get paid. Next in line are workers and secured creditors. Then come other employees, then government taxes. And way down at the bottom of the waterfall, that's where all the other unsecured debts are. So after the investigation, the restrictions, the selling of assets, we finally arrive at the end of the journey. The entire point of this incredibly difficult process is to reach one single destination, the discharge. And this right here, this is the finish line. The discharge order is what offers that clean slate we've been talking about. It's typically granted about a year after the bankruptcy starts, and it releases the person from having to pay back the debts that were part of the process. But it's not a magic wand. Some things like court fines or any debts that came from fraud, they don't get wiped away. Now, to put all this in perspective, it helps to quickly compare it to corporate bankruptcy, something you might be more familiar with. The biggest difference is the endgame. When a company is liquidated, it's dissolved. It just ceases to exist. But a person isn't a company. An individual gets a discharge. They're released from their debts and get a chance to move on with their life. And that really brings us to the final big question, doesn't it? The process is designed to give people a clean slate, a fresh start, but it comes at a huge cost. Losing assets, facing public disqualifications, and living under intense financial scrutiny. It truly reshapes a person's life. So you have to ask, is that destination really worth the journey? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.